Hi, everybody. Welcome to this evening. We are so excited for our candidates forum here, sponsored by the NAACP. My name is Kira Bauer. I am a community advocate, a community member. I'm also a small business owner and early childhood education provider. I own Little Scholars Development Center, Raise Development. And I am joined this evening by a amazing panel. So I'll give them all an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we're just going to jump right in. So I'll start with you, Mr. Andrew.
Hi, my name is Andrew Mark Carlos. I am the president of the Hispanic Business Professionals Association. We meet every third Thursday, networking, a little bit of margarita action going on, so come join us. And also, I'm here to represent Nuestras Raíces Community Center, which represents the fastest growing demographic of not just people in Spokane County, but also voters, 70% in the last 10 years. So up to a whole 7% this year. So glad to be on this panel.
Excellent. Thank you.
Demetrius Palmer, Vice President, Community Outreach and Engagement at Excelsior Wellness, also the owner and president of Impact Motion Sports that operates the Spokane Wolfpack Smart Pro football team, and also do some work with Kira as well at Raise. Yeah, happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyla Holt. I am the NAACP Youth Council president and a student at SCC.
All right. So we're just going to jump right in. This is a big night. Where we have an opportunity to all come together and hear what these candidates have to say. And speaking at the NAACP, obviously we are really listening for the impact that they hope to have within the community at large, and really those communities that we tend to serve here at this table. One of my first questions for you guys is, are there any specific topics that you're hoping to hear about this evening? I'll start with you, Kai.
One of the big things that I'm hoping to hear about, and I definitely think that there will be touching on, is the PFAS exposure, so like the forever chemicals. So I'm wanting to hear about that. Also hearing about what they want to do, like with bridging the gap with youth, because we're widely unrepresented in, government and stuff like that. So I want to see if they will touch on that.
Excellent. Yeah, those are big ones, right? And those are ones that historically impact Black and brown communities.
Exactly.
So I am excited to hear about that as well. How about you, Mr. Palmer?
I think for me, just really access to healthcare in Black and brown communities, because we know that's a barrier. Knowing the demographics in Spokane, a big barrier is language.
Yes.
Right? And just having providers who can actually really match up with the people that are in need. So, that's really my main interest. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, for me, personally, like being from the Latin and Hispanic community perspective, I feel like they should probably, as part of the Coalition of Color, whenever they talk about Latin and Hispanic issues, they're always talking about immigration, they're talking about cleaning ladies. What I would really like to see from them is about the opportunity economy that they've been talking about this whole 2024 election, because that really matters here on a local level, because when you talk about Black and brown communities, we haven't had that generational wealth to start a store. We haven't had the generational wealth to start a venture capitalist and sort of project. You need that network, and I feel like sometimes it needs to be from the congressional level, from the legislative level, from our local politicians that know all the different things that are going on, especially like we were just talking about earlier, how in the West Hills there's a large Latin and Hispanic population, and they're really not seen, but they're actually one of the biggest economic engines in that area. So I would like to really hear how they're going to not just help us benefit from that with an opportunity economy, but also how they're going to approach that from.
On behalf of the Spokane NAACP, we'd like to thank you for attending our 2024 Candidate Forum and Town Hall. I'm your president of NAACP, Lisa Gartner, and thank you. I've only been president for now 10 months, so I'm still getting used to it. I think that I share that same newness with council president. We're new to our presidential roles here in the city, but I would like to say a special thank you to our Civic Engagement Committee. If you all could please give a round of applause to them. They've put their work and dedication into this forum tonight. Our chairs, Pat and Luke, they've done a tremendous job with getting you all here tonight, setting it all up, and reaching out to our candidates here. Before we go on, I'd like to acknowledge our dignitaries that are in the room. I see Council President here. If we can, in the back, I see you. Thank you, Council President. And then we do have our Commissioner, Al French. Thank you for being here tonight. I would also like to acknowledge to our land that we're on. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the 4 bands of the Spokane tribe of Indians: the upper band, the middle band, the lower band, and the Chihuahua band. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We show gratitude to the land, to the beautiful river out there, and the peoples who have been fishing, hunting, harvesting, and gathering here for generations. May we learn from one another's stories so that we may nurture the relationship of the peoples of the Spokane tribe and to all those that share the land. So, before we go on, just want to give you a little bit of background of NAACP. We are a nonpartisan organization. I purposely wore this t-shirt that says we're nonpartisan, but we're political as hell. We don't get into the battle of one side or another, but we do want to get into the policies. And so tonight is the opportunity to have a candidate forum where we get to hear from the candidates, hear from them on what their policies are, what they're looking to do for the people. And that's what NAACP is looking to do. We're looking to do education. We have a lot of voters out there who are registered, but they don't vote. They don't vote because of voter intimidation, or they don't vote because of lack of education. So this forum that we have today is to take down those barriers so that they are educated and so that they're informed before they go out to vote. Tonight we have with us our moderator, the very talented and beautiful Channing Curtis from Crim 2 News. Please give her a round of applause. She will be moderating, she will be introducing our candidates, and we will have an intermission between the candidate forum and the town hall. Channing will actually take us into that intermission. There are snacks, water. I think some of you have all pretty much helped yourself to that. But during the intermission, please help yourself to more snacks and water back there. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Channing.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So before we begin, let's first start things off by reviewing the audience responsibilities during the event. We'll take a look at some of them on the screen, and then I'll read over them as well. So to have a respectful civil event, audience members are asked to adhere to the following. Except for approved media, everyone needs to refrain from photographing or recording any and all portions of this event. The forum will be available to listen to on KYRS Thin Air Radio. Please be respectful to the candidates and to other audience members attending to listen and learn. Applause is encouraged only for candidates' first introduction and at the conclusion of the event. Please refrain from whistling, commenting, and or making any other indications of agreement or disagreement during this evening's event. Now, after a warning, we do reserve the right to request an audience member to leave if creating disruptions that interrupt with the event proceeding. Before we begin, though, we will also review the format that we're using for this candidate forum. So each candidate will begin with a 3-minute opening remark. The order in which the candidates will give their opening and closing statements has already been determined by a coin toss prior to the forum. Molly, you will open first with your opening statements, and Al, you will close first with your closing statements. Then the order of response to the first question will be made in alphabetical order based on the candidate's last name. Candidates will then alternate who responds first to the subsequent questions posed. A panelist will then be asking the candidates questions. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the panelist. A timekeeper will then be showing a yellow card to indicate the candidate has 30 seconds remaining in their response. A red card will then be showed to indicate the time as it has elapsed. I, the moderator, will ensure the time is respected and direct the panelists to ask the next question. I may also interrupt the forum to enforce any ground rules. Each candidate will then have 3 minutes to provide a closing comment. Audience members are to refrain from any recording, as again, the forum will be available to listen to on KYRS Thin Air Radio. Audience members are also requested to be respectful to candidates and other audience members who are attending to listen and learn. When the candidates are first introduced and at the conclusion of the forum, applause is encouraged. Audience members will refrain from whistling, commenting, and/or making any other indications of agreement or disagreement during the forum. After a warning, again, we reserve the right to request that an audience member to leave if creating disruptions that interrupt the forum proceedings. So now let's introduce our panelists. First, we have Alsada Bakana, NAACP Youth Council Treasurer. Fernanda Mascot from Nuestra Raíces. And Jamie Stacy, Vice President, NAACP. So now to talk a little bit about County Commissioner and our candidates. Of course, the Spokane County Board of Commissioners is responsible for providing legislative and administrative services to Spokane County. And we do have our two candidates here. We have Commissioner Al French and candidate Molly Marshall. Now, to read a little bit about Al French's background, Al French comes from Belton, Texas, just outside of Waco. His father served in the military, and after finishing high school, he also enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, where he served active duty during the Vietnam era, quickly rising to the rank of sergeant within his first 2 years in the Marine Corps, and was honorably discharged in 1972. In 1974, he was elected to the architectural students at the University of Idaho, where he attended college, and also got a single National Alpha Rho Chi Award as the Outstanding Architectural Student of the Year in 1977. As a frequent visitor of the 1974 World's Fair, he knew that he immediately fell in love in Spokane and moved to Spokane after he graduated in 1977. At that time, he began the process of securing professional licenses in several states as an architect and as a real estate agent. In 2001, he was elected to serve on the Spokane City Council representing District 1, the Northeast District of Spokane. Served on the Spokane City Council for 2 terms until being term limited off at the end of December of 2009, and in 2010 was elected to serve as County Commissioner. Now for Molly Marshall. A retired lieutenant colonel with 30 years of service in the Air National Guard, Molly Marshall is running for County Commissioner in District 5. Her career as a command pilot included multiple deployments, showcasing her leadership and commitment to service. Following her military career, Molly co-founded Citizens Action for Latah Valley, advocating for responsible development and holding elected officials accountable. She partnered with firefighters to host wildfire training and organized the Trolley Trail Gap Project, improving infrastructure and conserving land. Molly's proactive approach to community issues includes developing a plan for PFAS contamination cleanup on the West Plains, endorsed by affected residents, and a plan to reduce wildfire risk, endorsed by firefighters. She's dedicated to putting neighbors, families, and quality of life first. Now, if our panelists are again ready to begin our candidate forum. Now you can begin with your opening statements.
All right. It's all about perspective, isn't it? I have sat out there so many times, never thought I'd be sitting up here. So I'm really thankful to be here tonight. Thank you for inviting us for this forum, and thanks to the moderators. I am Molly Marshall, and I am running for County Commissioner. I have lived in Spokane County for 34 years, where my husband and I have raised our 2 daughters. It's a place that I'm very invested in because my community has invested in me. You know, right out of high school, I knew I wanted to go to college, so I joined the Air National Guard as an enlisted member and worked my way through the ranks, ended up getting my degree at Eastern, which opened some doors for me. I was able to get my commission and become a pilot, and after 30 years, I did retire. After that, I just had to stay busy, and so I did get really involved with my community. I joined my neighborhood council and was appointed to the Land Use Commission for the Community Assembly. I did that because I felt that my family and my neighbors were at risk for many of these public safety issues that I've been advocating for many years. So much so that I took it a step further and co-founded the community activist group, Citizen Action for Latah Valley. So I'll just tell you a little bit about District 5. It's very large, a very diverse district with urban and rural areas, business, ag, and one of the most important things in this area are our roads. So transportation infrastructure is extremely important to our public safety. It's what connects us as a community. And I feel like we've really missed some investments in these roads that are now, and we're seeing the results of it. We have issues with adequate emergency response and evacuation for our neighbors. Another issue that we've all kind of touched all of our lives is really the wildfire issue in District 5. It's at extreme risk for wildfire. There are many areas in this district that are threatened, and we haven't done enough to mitigate that risk. We're all aware of what happened last summer with the Oregon and Gray fires. And there were over 10 other fires in the district last year. Really opened our eyes to what we need to do to make sure that our communities are not at risk. And over this last winter and spring, we've seen folks start to lose their homeowners insurance. The other big issue of this district is the PFAS contamination in the West Plains. An issue that has really not been addressed, and their lives are threatened by this issue. So I want to bring responsible leadership to tackle these complex issues, leadership that will collaborate at all levels of government because they're complex, and leadership that has integrity, is responsible, and there's my time.
All right, thank you, Molly. Now, Commissioner French.
Thank you. I want to start out by thanking the NAACP and its partners for bringing to the community this opportunity to learn about the critical differences between me and my opponent. I also want to thank the voters for the honor and privilege of being able to serve you for the last several years. When I first joined the county, it was in critical financial condition. Several times during the year, it had to borrow money to be able to pay to meet payroll. It had a low reserve and a low credit rating, and expenses were exceeding its revenues. I worked with my fellow commissioners to bring a private sector business approach to county government. We also engaged our employees to be able to buy the time to right-size the county to live within our means. Spokane County now has the highest credit rating of any county our size in the state. We have operating reserves, and that's why we've not had to increase property taxes for the last 2 years. I've worked side by side with our current and past sheriff and sheriff deputies across the county to keep you and your family safe. That's why I'm the only candidate in this race that they have endorsed. I brought new industries at over 6,500 jobs to the West Plains, $3 billion worth of new construction. I've been at the forefront at the state level fighting for affordable housing, and as an architect, I've been recognized as a leader in this forum throughout the state. I've also led the county in utilizing smart growth strategies and have been recognized by Smart Growth USA as the top 10% in the nation for utilizing smart growth strategies. My leadership skills have been recognized and awarded at the local, state, and national levels. I'm the only county commissioner in the state that serves on all 3 transportation boards. I've been selected by my peers to represent the collective interest of counties as we deal with roads across the state. I pride myself in my ability to collaborate, and that is why I'm endorsed by the past chair of the Democratic Party. I reach across the aisle, I reach across the river to work with folks that are committed, as I am, to find community solutions. Every promise I've made, I've kept. I will continue to work for you. I'll fight for you as we take on the challenges of today and tomorrow. I'm Al French. I'm your county commissioner, and I ask for your vote to continue on the journey together. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We will now turn our attention to our panelists who will begin asking with the first question.
Is it on? In 2023,
Testing, 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 testing. It's going up.
okay. In 2023, over 13% of households in Spokane County were food insecure. Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Not very well.
Well, are you guys comfortable? In 2023, over 13% of households in Spokane County were food insecure. How do you plan to address food insecurity?
So the county has been a partner with the food bank for many, many years. In fact, with the COVID crisis, we provided millions of dollars to the food bank and other agencies and other nonprofits throughout the county to make sure that not only folks that were not able to work because of the virus were able to get food and were able to sustain themselves during this period of time. We also provided millions of dollars to the school district to be able to pay for lunches and meals for our children that likewise did not have access to nutritional aspects within the community. So we continue to work with the nonprofits. We continue to work with the communities that are providing services to folks in Spokane County that are in need. And I'm very proud of the support that we've provided them, and we will continue to do that. I'll continue to do that over the next 4 years. Thank you.
Molly, you may now answer.
Yeah, food insecurity is something that we really need to address. It shouldn't be happening in our community, especially with our youth. I think Second Harvest is a outstanding organization that really works within our region, but also what's important, it works within our schools. And you know, I'm going to look to partner with organizations like Second Harvest to expand those opportunities and really work in our schools to make sure that our kids are getting fed. And you know, I think it's outstanding that we passed legislation, got the funding to get free lunches in schools. There's other organizations out there that I'm going to seek out and work to collaborate with agencies that are not within Spokane, but in the different municipalities within District 5. So Medical Lake, Cheney, Airway Heights, and make those partnerships and ensure that all people, not just the youth, but all people have access to food and be supportive in that initiative. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Now we're ready for our second question.
The community has voted down building a new county jail more than once, but the county commissioners still seem set on doing just that. What other avenues will you work on to decrease our jail population and make it safer?
Yeah, so you know, one of the first things I did when I started this campaign is I actually went to the jail because of the last measure. I wanted to understand the issue. I met with the corrections officers there and was so surprised when I did go to the jail and see how overpopulated, understaffed, and outdated that jail was. I did get their endorsement, but I also got the endorsement of the medical workers there and the prosecutors. So looking at the jail, I think we need to look at a new jail, but also a jail system. So we need to enhance our services like behavioral addiction services and create a system that's supportive, that actually we're able to hold people accountable, but then we provide those other services, but also rehabilitation services, reintegration services, so we're getting people back into the community. But the most important thing about this jail system is getting all the experts at the table to put together a plan that actually meets the needs of all. That didn't happen on the last measure, and we've wasted taxpayers' dollars. We got to take it to the taxpayers again, because we really do need a new jail, but it needs to be right-sized, and we need to talk to our community. So we're making good decisions to put a new system in place that will meet our needs and carry us into the future.
Thank you, Molly. Now, Al, you may answer.
So the criminal justice system in the state of Washington is really divided amongst many elected officials. You have the courts, you have the sheriff, you have the prosecuting attorney, public defenders, and the county. The only role that the county plays with regard to the criminal justice system is we are the landlords for the jail. And this facility was built in 1984. It's 40 years old. It's functionally obsolescent. It has lacks the technology to be able to keep inmates and our detention service officers safe. And so we've been working on this for many years, engaging with the community, engaging with the experts to try and find the right model, the right size. I was there when we started the Blueprint for Reform because I knew we had to reform the criminal justice system. It's much more than just a jail cell. It's how do you keep the community safe, and how do you make sure that the right people are incarcerated and those that are suffering from mental illness, drug addiction, or some other ailment are not made criminals in the jail system. And we are the first county in the state to create a crisis stabilization facility so that people that are suffering from a mental health crisis or drug addiction go for treatment, they don't go in the jail. I don't want the jail filled with folks that should not be there. They should be in treatment. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Now we're ready for our third question.
Inmates in the Spokane County Jail are served atrocious food with little or no nutrition. Instead, they are forced to supplement their meals by purchasing foods at wildly inflated prices from the commissary. Fruits and vegetables are non-existent. This is only one example of the inhumane way that inmates who are presumed innocent until proven guilty are treated. Don't you think it's time to do better? What specifically will you do?
The idea that people are not getting nutritional meals in the jail, I'm not aware of. I'm surprised by, because we do have a nutritionist, and they do provide meals for all of our inmates as well as our detention officers. You know, as you look at the jail facility, you only want to make sure that the people that are in the jail are those that have actually committed a crime. That's why the programs that we've instituted to try and keep people out of jail are so critical, and they are leading in the state of Washington. Like I said, the mental health crisis stabilization facility keeps people out of jail and gets them therapy, gets them medication. We also do therapeutic ride-alongs so that if a deputy encounters somebody on the street, they have a therapist there to be able to help them de-escalate the issue. We also have substance abuse programs are what we're now putting into place, as well as restoring our early case resolution. The jail was designed for 464 people, and many, many times it's overpopulated. We do need a new jail, but we also need programs to be able to make sure that the right people are incarcerated and those that need help have access to it.
Thank you. Molly, now you may answer.
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised to hear this. Like I said, you know, the first thing I did was take a tour of the jail. And the undermanning, the understaffed positions at the jail, I'm sure that I think, when I did talk to the corrections officers, the mental health workers, one of the biggest problems is their salary. So we are not able to get enough people to work in the jail and retain those people, so services suffer. This really ties into creating a comprehensive plan to to bring forth a new jail and new services, so this is not happening. And there is a problem. People are staying in jail that cannot make bail. And not everybody should be, I think we need to look at bail reform. Work with folks that just don't have enough money to make bail. But it can't work for everybody. Some people probably need to stay there. But we need to look at all these issues because we do have a really unbalanced system.
All right, thank you both. Now for our fourth question, Fernanda Mascot from Nuestras Raíces.
How will environmental justice be prioritized in underserved, marginalized communities, in particular improving urban heat islands?
Well, I think at the county, we have a great opportunity right now. We are in the process of doing an update to our comprehensive plan. In that comprehensive plan, there is a climate chapter. I attended the Climate Institute panel forum a couple weeks ago at Gonzaga, and I know they have invested quite a bit in trying to get out into the community and do the research on the heat maps. And there are, I think even Nuestras, and I apologize, Raíces, has a program where they're going out there and planting trees. So there's obvious evidence out there that this is really an issue. And getting out there and planting trees and changing that kind of stat in the areas that do not have trees, bringing the heat down. But working and partnering with the Climate Institute at Gonzaga, I think, is a good opportunity for the county to, to work the initiatives of our environmental justice, to put that into our comprehensive plan and make sure that we're addressing the issues of climate justice. And there's another opportunity here, and that's with wildfires. We have wildfires, but we also have smoke. Smoke and air quality is a huge issue. We need to look at those things, prioritize mitigating our risk with wildfire, and put all those things as part of a plan into our comprehensive plans. We're meeting the needs of environmental justice.
All right, thank you, Al.
So environmental justice, from my standpoint, has a couple different elements to it. I currently serve on the Washington State Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board and chair one of the committees that just is completing a study on how do we avoid overburdening communities with freight and business development. This report is going to go to the state legislature and help inform them on how do we prevent what happened to the East Central neighborhood when I-90 came through the community and cut that neighborhood in half and burdened it with industrial development. We shouldn't be doing that. We can't be doing that. And that's what I'm leading the effort at the statewide to try and make sure that we don't do that in the future. The other thing is how do you bring renewable energy to this community? I'm currently working as an architect and that has a background in this area with companies that want to bring hydrogen fuel cell manufacturing facilities, solar panel farms, and other renewable energy sources to Spokane County. This will be critical for our future as well as meeting the needs of our energy both today and tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now for our fifth question from our NAACP Youth Council Treasurer.
How do you plan to address the homeless crisis in Spokane County? What would be your top 3 priorities?
What we do at the county is a variety of different things. One, we do provide financial resources to the city and to nonprofits that address the needs of homelessness in our community. The other thing is we are compassionate with those that are on the street, typically suffering from either mental health crisis or drug addiction. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have programs now that provide therapy for those, as opposed to what previously done before I got to the county. They were put in jail. We just don't need to do that anymore. Nationally, the conversation is changing from housing first to more therapy first. Get folks stabilized and then move them into housing. So from the county standpoint, from my standpoint, I am more than happy to help folks that are in a situation of homelessness, but I do want accountability. I want a commitment that you are going to work with us to make an improvement in your life. We want them to be contributing members of our community, and to do that, they need help. And so I'm very proud of the record that I have in terms of serving with the homeless community and the nonprofits that provide those services. At some point, I look forward to a regional system, and that will take building trust and infrastructure.
All right, Molly, now you may answer.
Yeah, we definitely have a problem with homelessness, an issue with homelessness that affects the entire region. And that means we need to come together to address this issue. We need to really identify what we have. We have homelessness at different levels. Somebody maybe with a drug addiction living on the streets to somebody who's lost their home to a fire. So there's so many different solutions that we need to put towards finding solutions. And helping people get houses and get services they need. The county has a big role in this, and I think that's important to understand that the reason why it really needs to be homelessness, or excuse me, a regional homeless model is because so many different entities have services that need to come to this model. So the county has the behavioral service tax. They've invested that money into the stabilization center. We need to there's a lot of money just sitting there waiting to be invested. The county can do more by investing in more services related to behavioral health. But the key to this is coming together and working as a region together on this issue.
Thank you. And now for our sixth question from Jamie Stacy, Vice President of the NAACP.
Access to technology and the internet has become essential for education, work, and participation in society. But many families still struggle with digital inequality. What policies would you support to close the digital divide in Spokane, ensuring everyone has affordable access to technology and digital literacy resources?
Yeah, I think during COVID, we really saw how important it was to have access, and we're still coming out of that. I know the county has made a huge investment for rural areas getting internet access, broadband, and we need to expand that. And what I'd like to do is really go into the schools, work with the schools, see where the need is, partner with schools and find funding through grants and get access so folks can be connected. It really opens a door, especially in education. When our kids can work online and talk to folks online, talk to their teachers online, it creates a whole new world. And we need to make sure we're having equality when it comes to, because we have transitioned to such a tech-oriented education system. So I'm going to work on, partnering and then seeking out grants and funding to lessen this disparity.
All right, thank you. Now, Commissioner French.
So Spokane County is playing a leadership role throughout the state with regard to providing broadband and digital access to not only the urban areas, but also the rural areas. COVID did raise the awareness of the inadequacy of access to the internet, not only for kids that were in need of access for education, but also medical treatments, business. A whole litany of issues came to the surface through COVID. So we do have a broad link public development authority, a model that other counties throughout the state are starting to emulate, that is providing access, digital access throughout the county. We're doing it with mobile units until we can get the infrastructure in place to have hardwire facilities that will serve the entire county, both urban and rural. We've deployed a facility up in the area that was impacted by the Oregon fire, so that those folks have access to digital, as well as out in the Gray Fire. And in the southwest part of the county, we've got a model program that has been implemented here a couple months ago. So we are aware of the importance of it and working to satisfy it.
Thank you. Now, Molly, you may answer. You're done? Okay. In that case, then we are ready for our 7th question from Fernanda Mascata from Nuestra Raíces.
Many communities, especially non-English speakers, face barriers in accessing important services and information. How do you plan to address language access, ensuring that all residents of Spokane, regardless of their language they speak, can fully participate in civic life and access to essential services?
So translation services in the county are handled through the prosecuting attorney's office. They provide those services throughout the county. And as we become more diverse as a community, we are challenged by more languages that need to have translation skills and talents. I think the state recognizes 36 different languages. And so we are aggressively working to try and figure out how do we provide the skill sets and the expertise to make sure that anybody that comes to the county has access. You know, we want to provide equal access to everybody, and that means that you have to have the ability to communicate. Communication is translations, and like I said earlier, that is something that's handled through the prosecuting attorney's office on behalf of the entire county.
Now, Molly, you may answer.
So in Spokane County, there's over 40,000 people that do not speak English. That does not include folks with disabilities, the deaf and the blind. We need to do a better job at putting services and expanding our language access program in the county, because the county actually has been presented a plan and they have actually disapproved it. So this really hits home to me. In my travels in the military, I've been to many different countries where I didn't speak the language. It's frustrating, but there's also a safety issue. And we see this with wildfires or natural disasters in our area. We do not have language access for emergency notification, and that's a real problem. But Spokane County needs to be a welcoming place. People need to be able to go down there and pay their taxes, but also maybe like their car tabs. And then there's folks that are navigating the justice system, and they do not understand the language. We can do better, and we need to adopt that plan. It's low-hanging fruit. It's not going to cost a lot of money to do that because technology. That will be one of my top priorities when I become commissioner, is to get us a language access plan, because we do need to make Spokane County welcoming.
All right, thank you both. We are now ready to move on to our closing statements. Commissioner French, you may now go on with yours.
Again, I want to thank the NAACP for providing the community with this opportunity to learn more about the critical differences between me and my opponent. And again, I want to say thank you to the voters. It's been my greatest honor to be able to serve you as your county commissioner, and I look forward to doing that for the next 4 years. Over the years, I've led many successful initiatives that have made a positive impact on the county and its citizens. whether it was leading the effort to rebuild the Euclid Bridge, build the West Plains Transit Center, fund a new drainage system for the West Terrace neighborhood, see groundbreaking on the first regional park for the West Plains area, and being the visionary to create the West Plains Public Development Authority that has brought over 6,500 jobs and $3 billion in new construction. I firmly believe that I would rather give somebody a paycheck than a welfare check, and to do that, you need a good paying job. And that's one of the things that I've focused on, as well as housing. As I mentioned earlier, I'm one of the leaders in the state for bringing affordable housing models. Right now, that's to include condo development and a variety of other tools that are essential to be able to provide affordable housing for this community. Again, I'm Al French. I'm your county commissioner, and I ask for your vote to continue to serve you for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Now for Molly Marshall's closing statements.
Folks, we are at a crossroads in the county. This election is key. We can choose business as usual or status quo, or we can choose a change. And I tell you what, I'm going to prioritize safety. I'm going to prioritize our community, and I'm on a mission to make that possible. We are at a tipping point in our county with our public safety, and it's really time for change. And I bring forth great ideas and commitment. And with my experience, we will work together, bring the community voice back into government, and we're going to find the solutions to these difficult problems, these complex problems. I will work at all levels of government to collaborate, and I will bring respect, I will bring transparency, and I will bring access back to the county commission. So I would appreciate it if you would work with me. We can move forward to make District 5 a place where we are committed to our community needs and safety is top priority. And I would be honored to have your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
All right, thank you to both of our candidates who participated this evening, Al French and Molly Marshall. Thank you to our panelists for all of their questions. We will now have a 10-minute break to set up for our town halls. During our break, KYRS will be streaming from our reaction room, in which our moderator, Kiera Bauer from Ray's Development Center, will gather reactions to the candidate forum from Kalia Holt, our NAACP Youth Council President, Andrew Mark Carlos from Nuestra Raíces, and Demetrius Palmer, who is an NAACP member. Now, our first town hall will be with Natasha Hill, followed by our second town hall with Carmela Conroy. And please, a reminder to help yourself to the food and beverages in the back, and we'll be back in just 10 minutes. Yes.
Hey everyone, we are back. We've just concluded our candidate forum, and we've got a lot to discuss tonight. There's a lot going on out there. We had mentioned early on that we were looking for a couple of areas, and so I just want to dive right in, and we're going to save the best for last, but let's talk about the information that Molly was giving around what her plan was to, and I'm going to actually dive into food insecurity, so we'll just start at the beginning.
Go ahead, yeah.
When the question came about the 13% of households in Spokane County that were dealing with food insecurities, what were some of the things that stood out to you guys that they were bringing up?
Well, honestly, for me, it's just like, I'm not afraid to say it. Like, I was a lunch ticket kid. I mean, it was embarrassing to do that. It was embarrassing to, like, go to the food bank and fill it up, and that's your thing. So when Al French was saying it, honestly, I will say that didn't rub right with me. It's just like, we got to see these systems going. These systems haven't worked for decades. It's a stigma, and it does, it stays with you. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm proud. I'm 35. But I still have that stigma, oh, I need to work, so I don't have to go to the food bank.
Yeah.
So that's why when she was talking about Second Harvest and them going to schools, them making sure that they're working in partnership with the community, I appreciated that she was thinking about different ways to bring that system so it works for everybody, not just for people who are within the system.
Yeah. And I think they both really talked about creating and going to food banks or going to things like Second Harvest. Did it strike anybody that we weren't talking about the reason why there was food insecurity?
Yeah, I feel like it was more focused on the things that are currently going on. And just like you said, if we're still at 13% and you feel like these things shouldn't be happening, obviously it's not effective.
Right.
So it's one of those things where we want them to think outside the box. We want to be more solution focused instead of just saying, hey, we're currently doing this now. So, but yeah, adjusting the focus on why these things are happening. I mean, obviously food costs is one. Access can be one as well. When you think about transportation and things like that. Yeah, so just kind of really getting innovative in that way, it really needs to be the focus. So.
Absolutely.
And I like how you bring up food costs because the question was 13% of Spokane County is facing food insecurity. It's like Commissioner French has been there since 2011, and he didn't really address why it's at 13% if you've been there since 2011.
Yeah. Again, current systems not working. Not working. Excellent. Just to stay on the food vein, we were talking about the food systems or the food service that's happening in the prison system currently. And they're asking, how do you fix this? You know, people aren't getting fully nutritious meals. It was interesting to me that we went immediately to, well, we have a dietitian, right? We have a nutritionist. I really appreciated the information that came forward around the pay and the rate of pay and how that is impacting our employees and their ability to complete their job. How did that settle with you guys? And for those of us whether we're in management or we're in charge of payroll or small business owners, how did that impact you guys? How did that land with you to think about the fact that there are people not getting nutritious meals due to what we are paying the service providers?
It's like oil and water, right? It doesn't really make sense. If there's systems in place to make sure that individuals are being fed, that shouldn't affect the way that someone's thinking about their job or their current pay. Yeah, it is really mind-blowing to think that they don't have access to those things. I'm not sure. I was really unclear on how things were answered. If there's a nutritionalist that's feeding and making sure these people get their food, I feel like the question was more based off of commissary and what was available, and then the food cost of commissary. Why is that so high? So I think that is the part that kind of got lost in the sauce a little bit. So,
Well, also for me, as someone that's looking on the inside from the outside, Spokane and NAACP, I know that, with my work with them, that we do receive civil rights complaints, and sometimes they're from the jail, from our jail, I wouldn't say ministry, but our jail outreach. So I'm pretty sure that we're getting some of those complaints about nutrition from those prisoners or from their families. So I'm surprised that Commissioner French said that he's not aware of this. If the Spokane NAACP is getting this, and it goes to your question about being a good manager, being someone within a business model, as he said that he's running the county. If you are running it from a business model and you're learning about these shortfallings from outsiders, from these different nonprofit groups that are set up to help all these iniquities, what are you doing? That's just my question.
It's a good question. I think we go back to a statement that was made, and that is the county is just a landlord here. We're just the landlord here. I thought that was really interesting. Were there any other interesting pieces or parts to these conversations centered around what we're paying service workers? And, we're going to get into social justice and, how we were talking about public safety and all the work that's being done there. But was there anything else that stood out to you guys that we should be covering and talking about food securities or insecurities?
Well, before we move on from the topic of the jails and the lack of nutrition thereof, I think it's also something that they mentioned about, I believe it was Molly Marshall talking about the salaries are also horrible there at the jail. So if we're talking about social justice, we're talking about also those who are not just in the prison cell, but also those who are making sure that those who are in a prison cell away from society those reflect our community, right? Because when you want to talk about the whole entire social justice system, you want to make sure we're there at every single step. So how are you making sure that's not just dominant culture, that's making sure that we are in the jail cells? How are you making sure that those reflect us and those reflect our culture as well? So how are you incentivizing Black and brown people to actually be the wardens, to be those jail prison guards, to be the nutritionists, to understand the nutrition? Because I'll tell you, within Latin and Hispanic community, a lot of us are misdiagnosed with diabetes, with high pressure, high blood pressure. It's our diet. It's something that, like, instead of telling us, oh, you should probably monitor your diet, you're saying, oh, you have high cholesterol, you have high blood pressure. It's like, why don't you just tell us about, like, how to monitor our food intake? Someone within a community would know that versus dominant culture who's saying, like, oh, you have high sugar, like, this is through your family. Why is it a family history? So I feel like that's also how you talk about it when you talk about the lack of salary, the lack of living here in the jail system. How are you incentivizing Black and brown folks to actually work in every single step of that?
Yeah. I think that's a good conversation, and it can really lead into when we're talking about PFAS and prior to going into the forum, really understanding that we have contaminated water, and we have two candidates who have very differing objectives to how they are going to purify the water and clean things up. Where you have Commissioner French saying that, we're going to repipe water in from the Spokane River, which is a lofty and, wonderful idea if we can get fresh, clean running water. And then you have Molly Marshall. She has her 5-point plan. A part of that is like the immediate need. We're going to get a hold of ARPA dollars and create filtration systems and so on and so forth. I like what you're saying, right? Because either of these programs, if they are to succeed, are going to need infrastructure, going to need somebody to design, going to need somebody to put those pieces into place. When we look at the work that these candidates are doing, how connected to the community do you feel that they are to be able to bring those resources, bring those jobs in to Black and brown communities? Really, to the point that you were making earlier, we need to be able to bring economy to Black and brown communities so that they can be a part of building the infrastructure. How connected did you guys feel listening to them that they would be to be able to do that?
I felt that, as we saw with Al French's, the way he skirted around a lot of talking about like community efforts and stuff like that, about his connection to the community. We didn't see him talking about, he was talking mostly about within the people that are already in office and stuff like that, instead of talking about organizations within the community that need representation, want to be a part of, to partner up with, officials and elected officials, so they can, be voiced and heard. Because obviously we see, like, with the candidates, there's not much diversity amongst, race, age, things that matter, because, we're all a part of the Spokane community, and we need to be represented.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I definitely felt like he, and for reasons of just keeping things equal and equitable at this table, recognizing that he really is uplifting a lot of, and it spans his career, right, of the work that he's done previously, and really standing very strongly behind that. I think the question always comes back for me is, in the past, what have you done to bring these resources to certain communities? And then what is your plan moving forward? Did anybody feel whether even from Molly, did we hear that? Did we feel that?
So I do feel that. I feel like, so a lot of people talk about this like David and Goliath because he's been there so long, right? But I do appreciate the, what's it called, the institutional knowledge that Commissioner French has. Like, for example, when he talked about how to stop overburdening neighborhoods with freight, i.e. the East Central neighborhood with I-90. It's not just a Black neighborhood that was destroyed by that. It was also a traditional Jewish neighborhood that was split. There's 2 Jewish temples here in Spokane, and that's because it was split in half by the freeway. So that's actually something that we're talking about nationally with the freeways coming in through the poorer neighborhoods. So it's good to have someone that was there. But also, I feel like you said, Molly Marshall represents working with all of these different community neighborhoods. Like, her background is with the Citizens for Action for Lake Tahoe Valley, with the neighborhood systems that's been there since 2000. But I feel like it's a different way of how you approach this. Like you said, moving forward, how are you going to work with this? Are you going to bridge that? Are you going to bridge between the neighborhood systems and all of the different nonprofits and with the government, or are you just going to go your own way with your silo?
One of the things that, and I'll just ask, was anybody at this table aware that he sat on a regional board, and where he's like championing for bringing renewable energy to these communities like East Central? Anybody at this table aware of that?
I was aware of it, but I feel like just being Texan like he is originally, we don't really like to toot our own horn. We just put our head down and just keep the work going.
Yeah.
But he does have a long history behind him. It's just I wonder how those regional efforts are going if everyday people like you, I've worked with you in community. If everyday people like you don't know about it, how's that community outreach working?
And I think that lends to the bigger issue of how connected are we, right? I was excited to hear that. How do we move that dial forward so that we all have a part in bringing those resources? All right, let's move on to the homeless crisis. I like that question. It was a very direct question. Will this be a top 3 priority? I drive often through the downtown Spokane with my 13-year-old daughter, and she always says, "Oh, Mom, I hate this part of Spokane. I wish they'd clean it up. I wish it were cleaner." How did that conversation land with you guys? We talked a lot about the efforts that are currently happening. We talked about, compassion work that's happening in ensuring that those who are experiencing homeless or houselessness are first, looking at getting the supports and the stabilization that they need, and then moving them into homes, and that being more of a national approach. How did that conversation land with you guys?
I like how Al was more, he was educated on that process, right? Knowing that it's more geared towards mental health versus, people still are learning the fact of mental health and mental illness is completely different. And really tying in homelessness into that. I like that he was educated on that part. But one part that that I'm still trying to process now, I mean, there's no right or wrong, but his way of stabilizing was giving them housing and then into services.
Actually, I think it was the other way around, because he did say therapy first and accountability.
Okay,
Yes.
there you go. Okay,
Yes.
That's the part I think I was still like, okay, that's good then. Well, he's great. There he is.
Yeah. How about, when I think about, and I think sometimes we want to jump right into like getting people off the street.
Right.
But sometimes, and I like that saying, it's not about giving the man the fish, but it's teaching them how to fish, right? And it's about stabilizing them where they are, and then getting them to the point where you can appreciate housing, and it is something that you want and you see as a benefit to your life versus dealing with this the sickness, whether it's mental health sickness or drug addiction.
I feel like that's the other side of the coin with Molly Marshall, right? When she talked about the regional homelessness collaboration that they're trying to work on. We've been working on this for at least 2 years now. But she did shout out Medical Lake. She did shout out all these small cities that don't have homeless services right now, but they do have other things to bring to the table, with whether it be talents or programs that they use locally, whether it be drug addiction or mental health behavioral services. So again, it seems like these two candidates are very unique in their approach. Molly Marshall seeing collaborative from community versus Al French, who he is right. Our mental health behavioral system is renowned throughout the state, and we are seeing other stabilization centers being opened throughout the state because Spokane County led the way. So it's really how you see the approach, whether it's wholesome or whether we're going to use all of the above tactics, or whether, like you said, we're going to go through behavioral services and therapy first.
Yeah. And he had mentioned providing money to the city and nonprofits and doing that compassionate work. So in this respect, I think they both had kind of a very clear understanding of the issues and how to move forward. You definitely, I definitely felt like they're both committed to the work. How they're going about that might differ slightly, but it did feel as though like we might have a path forward. So that was hopeful.
I mean, it does really come down to how are you going to connect with the community? Like you just have to. It's not just, hey, let's go and figure out what's going on. It's like coming with a strategic plan on how we're going to really address those issues. I think my overview of things is, you have great organizations that have great intentions, but they just don't know how to make that connection. And I think that's one thing between these two or the candidates in general that I'm going to be looking for. Yeah, really is. It's one thing I know you can't really go in too much in the community, but it's one of those things to where you can put an action plan together to make sure it's effective when you do. So
good. Let's see. Oh, there's so much good stuff, you guys. When we start looking at tech for families and the digital divide.
All right,
this
everyone,
was-
we will begin the town
Yeah,
hall
that was
in
a
just
that was a
about 1
very
minute if you
interesting
wanna start
question.
finding your seats.
And I really go back to, and I come from the education sector and specifically the early childhood education sector, and I remember during COVID, how like the schools were shutting down and there were kids that we were graduating kindergartners and that we were expecting them to be home. And so I thought it was just a very interesting conversation that I hope we get some more time. You guys make sure that you tune in and listen to the debates, or the forum conversations that happened earlier to really see how these two candidates are approaching the tech disparities. And we are getting ready to go into our second forum, and we're into our town hall. We're very excited for. Thank you guys all for being here, being a part of this conversation.
Thanks for moderating this. This is great.
I cannot wait to come back. What did Lisa say? We are biased to either side, but we are political as hell, and I definitely believe that. I definitely believe that, and as we sit under these conversations, we want to make sure that we are keeping just a very open mind, because at the end of the day, does it really matter whether you're Republican or Democrat if you're showing up in community and you're doing the good work? And that's what we want to see. When we look at what's been going on over these past 15, 20 years, is this the Spokane that we want to continue? Or are we looking for a new Spokane and a new direction forward? And which of these candidates can bring that to us?
And I think it's also a conversation about the region, right? Because Eastern Washington and Northern Idaho, it started turning into a mega region where a lot of folks who are moving in here, they're changing the demographics of it. Like Spokane is actually a hub for higher education. A lot of those folks end up staying here and adding those talents to the pot and bringing in those new ideas, and we're wealthy for it. So I just feel like that's also adding to that dynamic.
Okay. One of the things that I am really looking forward to in this next town hall, and I'm just going to do a little shameless plug, you guys, and you just talked about higher ed. One of the things I'm really looking forward to is somebody to come out and talk about the foundation of education. I want to hear how we are going to address the childcare crisis, because everything that we've talked about, from the homeless community to water or food insecurities and on and on and on, they all start in early childhood education. So I'm very excited to see what our next two candidates have to say about that field. Are there anything quickly, give me 1-word responses, 2-word responses. What are you guys looking forward to hearing about from Natasha Hill and Carmela Conroy in regards to their platforms and how they're showing up in the community. What are you guys looking
Well,
forward to?
they all talk about lived experience, but so what are they going to do with that lived experience? Are they going to help that with our experiences in the Black and brown communities?
Interesting. How about you? What are you
You know,
looking for?
I'm looking to see how they're going to represent all of Spokane, every single
Yes.
sector.
Yes.
I think how they're going to support Black and brown small businesses. I think that will catch my attention for sure.
Absolutely. We in the Black and brown communities for so long, we have built the infrastructure, we have built the systems. Our intellectual properties have been monopolized and have been stolen and taken. And I'm just gonna say it, it's been stolen.
Blue Eyed Soul, what?
Come on, what is that, right? These things have been stripped
All right,
from
we
our
are almost
communities
ready to
without
begin
compensation
our
and without
first town hall.
acknowledgement
I'd
of
like to
our
ask
work.
everybody
And
who is
so
sitting in the
I
audience,
am
if you
looking
wouldn't mind
forward
moving up
to
towards the
hearing
front.
exactly that. How are you going to stop these common practices? How are you going to
Don't
move
be
the
shy. It's
needle
okay.
so
That was
that
a perfect time
our
to get to
small
know somebody.
businesses, so that our youth, so that our communities continue to stay engaged and our work is represented and recognized?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's also back to the conversation about us becoming a little regional hub, that different spices are coming into this melting pot, right? So before you had the, let's get past the, like, this is Spokane NAACP. We all know the scandal I'm talking about. But now we're getting more authenticity. We're getting more culture and celebration and, you know, celebrating those
Alright, so welcome
individualities
back,
throughout the whole
everyone.
entire
We will
city.
now
I mean, like,
begin our first town
Luke
hall
Jasmine,
meeting with
who
Natasha
is
Hill, candidate for
Luke
state
Jasmine, who
representative in
is
District
part of the
5.
NAACP.
So
His
first we're going
sister
to
is
review
executive
our
director
town
of
hall
Creole
format.
Resources for the
The
Haitian
candidate will
community.
begin
So
with a
that's a
2.5-minute
beautiful
opening
We're doing
little
big
thing.
things.
panelists
We're doing
will
big
Beautiful
things
thing
here.
that's adding to
asking
our
the candidates
landscape.
questions. The candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each panelist. A timekeeper sitting right here in the front row will show this card right here to indicate the candidate has 30 seconds to remain in their response time. Then a red card will show that your time has then expired. Oops. Now, I, as the moderator, will make sure that everyone's time is respected and direct each panelist to ask the next question, and I may interrupt the forum to enforce the ground rules. The candidate will have 3 minutes to provide a closing statement at the end. Now, for our audience members, once again, you are to refrain from any recording, as the forum will be available to listen to on KYRS Thin Air Radio 88.1 and 92.3 FM. Audience members are once again requested to be respectful to the candidates and to other audience members who are attending to listen and learn. When candidates are first introduced and at the conclusion of the town hall, applause is encouraged. Audience members will refrain from whistling, commenting, and or making any other indications of agreement or disagreement during the town hall. After a warning, we do reserve the right to request that an audience member leave if creating disruptions that interrupt the forum's proceedings. Now, an introduction of our candidate, Natasha Hill. Natasha Hill was born and raised in North Spokane in the Hilliard neighborhood. Raised with her 3 siblings by a single mother and maternal grandmother, she grew up on welfare, experienced food and housing insecurity, and witnessed domestic violence and substance abuse. Natasha had to work hard to rise above her initial circumstances. She graduated in 2006 and passed the California bar. Natasha is now barred in all California and Washington state courts and in the U.S. District Courts for the Eastern District of Washington. She is now also a licensed real estate broker and member of the Spokane Realtors Association. In 2021, Natasha was selected by House Representatives Marcus Riccelli and Tim Ormsey for the Spokane County Commissioner Redistricting Committee to help create 5 equitable voting districts in an ever-growing Spokane County. This historic bipartisan effort resulted in Democratic representation at the county level for the first time, with 2 of the 5 commissioners now being Democrats. Natasha went on to run a historic race against Kathy McMorris Rogers in 2022, the first woman of color to run for the seat. She earned 60% of the vote in the 3rd LD and is ready to head to Olympia to ensure Spokane gets the resources it needs and deserves. Last November, Natasha became the interim director of the Black Lens News, relaunching an iconic Spokane community newspaper, ensuring the African American community has a strong voice and connection across Spokane. Natasha has spent 17 years representing people from diverse backgrounds in her legal practice, including those most vulnerable in our community. She has built strong community connections and relationships, working to uplift marginalized communities, fighting against MAGA extremism, and bringing people to the decision-making table who are too often left out of the process. Natasha and her 2 children now live in the Cliff Cannon neighborhood on Spokane's South Hill and enjoy spending time with family and exploring the beautiful outdoors. Our candidate, Natasha Hill.
Thank you, Channing, for that lovely introduction. And I want to thank the Spokane NAACP for hosting this town hall and inviting me. I'm really honored to be here and looking around and to see so many familiar faces. I don't know how much I need to add to the introduction as far as my background, but one thing that I think is really important for me to highlight is that the organizing work that I started doing that kind of led me into politics really started around civil rights and the NAACP chapter here in Spokane, leading the way when it came to the Black Lives Matter protests after George Floyd was murdered. I saw something in Spokane that I had never seen before. Growing up here in the Hilliard neighborhood, I just had never seen so many people from so many backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, all in one place, all standing up for the same thing. That was really eye-opening. What else became eye-opening is just how politics really is and the powers that be and the limited leadership that we have here in Spokane. I saw an opportunity to get involved locally with our party. I ran for Spokane County Chair and I lost. I'm not afraid of losing. I think we learn a lot through that process, and one of the things I got to do is build a network of people. That included my future seatmate, Tim Ormsby. Very proud to say that I do have his endorsement. I've also been endorsed by Marcus Riccelli, and this is his seat that is now open that I'm running for as he's moving on to the Senate. We know that this is a strong blue district, and so we know that whoever made it through our primary was gonna be in the seat to go to Olympia and represent. For me, it was really important that I sent a strong message that representation with lived experience matters. We have to listen to people who've lived it, who've done it, who've overcame it, and actually go back and show up in their community for people who are still dealing with it. I don't know it all just because I've been there. And so for me, it's important to show up and listen, and that's something I learned during redistricting. And so I'm really proud to have gotten my start organizing in politics here. I left for a long time. I came back to raise my 2 kids here with my family, and I wanna make sure that we do have a healthy, safe community where people can have outcomes regardless of what neighborhood they live in or where they're from. There's a lot of division, obviously, and we've got to stand up and use our voice against the hate that we see in our region, and I intend to do that.
Thank you, Natasha. Now for our first question from our first panelist, Fernanda Mascot from Nuestra Raíces.
Mental health in public schools must be prioritized to ensure that students are in a healthy state of mind that enables them to fully participate in their school experience. What measures will be taken to fully fund mental health supports, including equitable and competitive salaries for practitioners?
I definitely want to be a champion around education. One of the things we've seen is a lot of attacks against our school boards and curriculum. That doesn't make things any easier when these are the folks who can speak the loudest for our students in terms of needs. We know mental health has been a huge issue even before COVID, but that's been escalated since. Right now we're going into a budget deficit, to be really candid, when it comes to the legislature next year. So one of the things we can't afford is to cut revenue, especially when we know we need more. I will work really hard with Tim Ormsby to make sure we're not cutting educational programs, that we can keep these services that we have, but look at ways that we can help expand them. We have to look at what works, and we need to be efficient. And we know that we can't punish our way out of a lot of these issues. And the students who are having mental health crisis oftentimes are the ones who are being disciplined and put on this trajectory, or we call it the school to prison pipeline. We have to build a school to success pipeline at all costs. That means we have to look at what plagues our families, and we know one of the biggest stigmas of, not just stigmas, but health determinants and social determinants is people living in poverty. We have really high rates of poverty. So when you have increased mental health issues, high rates of poverty, and we also have our high rates of child abuse and domestic violence. We have a lot of problems we need to solve, and I think we can bring people together around that. So we've got to vote no against the measures on the ballot right now that are looking to cut back revenue. Voting no on all these measures is really important.
Now for our second question, our panelist Asada Bakana from NAACP Youth Council Treasurer.
What will be your top 2 legislative priorities once you are elected?
You know, I've been showing up around the campaign, different places, hearing from constituents, and I think housing has been number one. It's definitely been the one I think I've been the loudest on and probably gotten the most, attention for. We need rent stabilized in our communities. We're pricing people out of their homes. One of the biggest determinants of health and safety and homelessness is housing costs. And we hear that from our Washington State Alliance, who has also endorsed my campaign, the Action Fund. And we have people who are working really hard, boots on the ground here, and that's what it's gonna take in order to stabilize families. But pricing is important, so housing, number one. As far as public health and safety, a lot of this is tied together, so we've got to look at how we can improve that. It does come back to that first question of mental health, making sure that there's resources available, and also substance abuse. We've had this fentanyl crisis going on for quite some time. This is not new, and this isn't a time to cut back resources for treatment that we need. This is not just going to keep people in the community safe, but our service providers as well. We have people who, we've had increased rates of first responders going out. This is causing, I just came actually from a nurse's dinner, and one of the issues there is the safety of folks who are providing in-home care, as well as the safety of folks, for example, in the ER, who are having to treat these patients. So these are overlapping things. If we can invest upstream in housing and healthcare, these are 2 areas. Childcare would be my third, and I don't want to leave it out because it's so important to our workforce.
Thank you. Now for our third question from Jamie Stacy, NAACP Vice President.
Spokane's 3rd district has had long-standing representation from Senator Billig, Representative Riccelli, and Representative Ormsby. As a new legislator, how do you plan to build on this continuity while bringing your unique perspective? What aspects of their work would you preserve, and what new initiatives would you champion?
You know, I know there's some really tall shoes to fill here with Marcus in this seat. He's been a champion for our students as far as making sure kids are fed in schools. He's also been on the forefront when it comes to healthcare initiatives. So those are things I want to pick up on. Having Tim Ormsby, who's not going to be around for much longer, really provide mentorship and help me build those relationships so we can maintain the leadership that we've historically had. Losing Andy is a big deal. He's Senate Majority Leader. They've worked really well, not just in a delegation together, but across with other delegations, with Republican delegations and electeds here in our region, and we have to keep doing that. I understand that that's the role we have to play because we have to be looking not just in the city and in our district, but across our county and across Eastern Washington. There's a lot of investments that we need to make, and so it's really important that we do have a loud voice over in Olympia, and I think I can offer that in order to make sure they appreciate we're the 2nd biggest city, 4th largest county, and we're growing at unprecedented rates, and that comes with investment and resources that are needed. And we also have what the West Side doesn't have, which is room to grow. And so I think it's really important that I do step up and pick up where they've left off to really be that leadership, be strategic, look at committees. And as a woman, and not having had a woman in this delegation since Lisa Brown, who's now our mayor, over a decade, first person of color. And as I sit here in this forum, I think that's really important just to see how far we've come, but how much further we have to go.
Thank you. Now for our 4th question from Fernanda Mascot from Nuestra Raíces.
How will you prioritize environmental justice in underserved marginalized communities, in particular improving urban heat islands and chemical waste sites?
You know, there's been a lack of social equity when we take into consideration environmental policy and just in terms of how we're taking care of our neighborhoods. So some of the things that we have going for us are people who are really dedicated to these issues, that are working really hard. Those are the folks that I plan to work with and show up and listen to, whether it's our river keepers or our lands council. We definitely need to see protection around the Climate Commitment Act, which is also on the ballot. It's one of those measures we're saying to vote no against. As far as, we've got some serious issues. I know some of this stuff is local. Chemical cleanup, nuclear waste, those are things that do impact our region. I'm sure we heard at the county commissioner, from our county commissioner elected and candidate earlier, the PFAS that are in the water in terms of that contamination and cleanup and what we need to do to keep our rivers safe. We know that water is life, and it's really important that we prioritize those things. When it comes to heat issues in terms of the canopy that we have and investments that we can make, that's a great example of what we can do now in order to address the climate issues that we have. We know fire season's a new season. We've seen these hurricanes that are happening. In neighborhoods like mine in Hilliard, you don't have that tree canopy, but we do have some organizations that are pushing really hard to get out there, to plant the trees, to make sure this is a known issue, and really encourage people in the community to embrace it, and also show up and let their electeds here at the local level know how important this is.
All right, thank you, Natasha. Now you may begin your closing statements. You have 3 minutes.
Again, I want to thank all of the panelists here, as well as our moderator, and NAACP for hosting this town hall. I encourage folks to really reach out. I know this is a blue seat, and I expect to be in Olympia next year, working with Tim and Marcus. And I think it's really important that I bring voices to the table that have felt like they haven't been represented for a long time. I want to be that elected. I want to be that person who shows up. I want to come to this being transparent. I'm sure I'll make mistakes, and I'll be looking to all of you to hold me accountable, especially the folks that helped me get started. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm really excited that I had this opportunity to run again. When I ran for Congress, one of the things that came up is what are you interested in? What do you want to run for next? And that wasn't really my initial thought, because it was really hard. But I wasn't interested in anything statewide. I really want to focus my energy and attention here in Spokane, where I'm raising my family and where I know people and their families, and see how far we can take this. At the same time, I don't want to be the last person of color in this seat. I don't want to be the last woman in this seat. I don't want to be the last person from the communities that I know have been left out and left behind to be in this seat. So I really want to get people engaged along the way. I want to encourage more folks to consider getting involved in politics in some level, thinking about themselves maybe being an elected position. It wasn't until 2021 until any of this came into my mind. And so what I've accomplished in 3 years, just know I'm here to support the next round of folks who are looking to do this. And I see you, and I won't say your name, but I see you. I know there's people who have great platforms, and they have so much to contribute. And this is such a tough seat to be in. You're opening yourself up to all the criticism as a public figure. People don't really know much about you or who you are, or your backstory. And sometimes when you're really passionate and you get really loud, it can be a little bit scary and uncomfortable. But that's okay. The more of us who are showing up and working together, we can shift some of those perspectives. We can change some of that stigma, and we can kind of peel back those layers that are what make us different, right? But the things that we can love and respect about one another, to really find those common commonalities that we have that bring us together. We've got a lot to fight for. There's things happening at every single level. One of the things Tim Ormsby and I have done is we've kind of done a play on the presidential campaign to really bring that energy down to the local races. I know my seat's pretty safe, right? But I know that we got to get people out voting. So tell everybody you know, remind everybody you know to get those ballots in, to vote now, vote early, and vote Democrat up and down the ballot. Because folks who have our identities and belong to communities like the NAACP represents for, the most vulnerable, the most subject to civil rights violations, everybody needs to vote November 5th. And I really, again, appreciate you for giving me this time, and I look forward to representing you in Olympia. Thank you.
Thank you. That's candidate Natasha Hill, running for State Representative, Legislative District 3. Thank you. Now we'll give you some time to walk off the stage, and we will welcome our next town hall candidate, Carmela Conroy. While we're giving Carmela Conroy some time to get up here, I'm going to go over our town hall format just one more time. Again, the candidate will begin with a 2.5-minute opening remark. Panelists will again be asking the candidates questions. The candidate will then have 1.5 minutes to respond to each panelist. A timekeeper sitting down here will be keeping the time for us. And they will be indicating to the candidate when you have 30 seconds remaining in your response time and when it is time for you to finish your thought and wrap up. I will be here to ensure that time is respected, and I will be directing each panelist to the next question. I may interrupt the forum to enforce ground rules. The candidate will then have 3 minutes to provide a closing statement to wrap things up. And again, as a reminder, audience members are to refrain from recording, as the forum will be available to listen to on KYRS Thin Air Radio 88.1 and 92.3 FM. Now about our candidate, Carmela Conroy. Carmela's grandfather was a union mason on the Grand Coulee Dam, and her father was a Union Railroad worker with the Great Northern Railroad, later part of the BNSF. Carmela is a dues-paying member of the union representing U.S. Foreign Service personnel. Rooted in the hard work and resilience of her family, Carmela paid her way through college and law school, returning home to serve as deputy prosecutor for Spokane County. From her work in criminal justice to her service abroad, Carmela has built connections with veterans, active duty military personnel, and professionals in national security. Our nation faces complex challenges both at home and abroad. The dysfunction and bipartisan extremism in Congress have left critical issues unaddressed, from agricultural policy to national security to the well-being of our communities. As a representative, Carmela will prioritize the needs of Eastern Washington, advocating for agricultural support, affordable health care, and economic opportunities for working families. By investing in rural infrastructure, clean energy, and economic diversification, Carmela will work to strengthen our local economy. Carmela Conroy. You may go ahead and begin with your opening statement.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. It's our democracy is a fragile thing, and coming out on a night when you could have been home relaxing with your family and your pets and little Netflix and chill, and being here instead is a vote for a better future. And it's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here with you. I remember when there was a story that my dad and my grandfather would tell almost exactly the same way, that my dad was working as a day laborer on construction sites, or my grandpa was a cement mason, and he was working on the extra board. He was sort of on call with the railroad. And after a few months of being on call, the railroad called him up and offered him a full-time job. And he went to my grandfather and said, I'm getting paid so much more by the hour on construction. Why would I go work for the railroad? And for the church amongst us, pardon my language, but this is verbatim. They both would tell the story exactly the same way. My grandfather said, "Don't be a goddamn fool. You take the railroad job. You'll get insurance, you'll get a pension, and God willing, one day you'll get to work indoors." And so that was sort of the basis that I was starting out from when I was thinking about what my life was going to be like going forward. And I found out in junior high school that there were people who got paid to dress up and talk, and they almost always worked indoors, and they were called lawyers. And so I set my sights on that, and didn't know very much about it, didn't have anybody in my family who'd done that. But this was back when the federal government supported higher education. And so going to an in-state public university meant that you could do that on a minimum wage job without going into serious debt. We need to get back to that again. We need to support working families so that kids in working families can see a path forward to comfort, to respect, and to, if they want to, work indoors one day. And that's what I'd like to do as your congresswoman, is get back to thinking about what regular working people in our district need.
Thank you. Now for our first question from Jamie Stacy, NAACP Vice President.
after listening to some of the debate with Michael Baumgartner at Whitman College. Your website said you will work with localities to take a holistic approach to tackling crime, substance misuse, and supporting mental and behavioral health. What does that look like?
It's tough to do at a federal level because local problems have got to have local solutions. These can't be dictated from a central top, but they can be funded from a central top. I was with the Spokane County Prosecutor's Office for 4 years, and the last year that I was in the juvenile division. And I, first of all, came to appreciate how much I did not appreciate my parents for the model that they'd set for us, for them being able to stay together, for avoiding injury and addiction, and we didn't have to worry about synthetic opioids and the harm that comes to individuals and communities back in the day. And I realized that we had kids, and the way that we dealt with kids in the system who had behavioral issues, had emotional issues, had addiction issues, is we would cooperate to make sure that they were found to have been convicted of crimes so that the court could order and pay for treatment that their families could not otherwise afford, and that is shameful. And every family that needs treatment for their child, for that child to grow up healthy and strong, should be available to them. And the fact that the Department of Defense found that 70% of American youth between the ages of 16 and 24 are ineligible for military duty because they are either physically or mentally or emotionally unfit is a challenge to our society. That's not individual parents failing their children. That is society as a whole failing all of our children, and we need to support them.
Now for our next question from Fernanda Mascot from Nuestra Raíces.
Congress appears to be extremely polarized at this time. Do you feel that it is important to be able to work in a bipartisanship manner? How will you go about that?
I do agree that Congress has to work in a bipartisan manner. I had almost 30 years of nonpartisan public service, when I was at the prosecutor's office, when I was with the State Department, when it was my job to support a victim getting through the criminal justice system, supporting an American who was in a foreign prison, supporting an American business that was being treated unfairly because the host nation thought that they would be able to push American businesses around in ways that they wouldn't be pushing local businesses around. I never asked what their political persuasion was. It didn't matter what their political persuasion was. It was my job to look after Americans and American interests and do the best I could. I did that under Democratic presidents and Republican presidents and did my very best to return value to American taxpayers. And that's what I intend to do when I'm in Congress. For reasons that are completely beyond me, we will elect leaders who constantly talk down the government. It'd be like hiring an auto mechanic who advertises that they hate cars and want them driven off the road. Why would you do that? So why would we hire people who say that what they want to do is to get into government and break it down? And there is an extreme wing of one of our major political parties that is trying to do exactly that. The MAGA movement has to be stopped, and the way we stop it is by getting out and voting.
For our next question, Alsada Bacana, NAACP Youth Council Treasurer.
How will student loan debt be evaluated or mitigated in context to racial wealth gap?
As anybody who's a first-generation college student in their family approaches school with it's the unknown, it's expensive. My parents emotionally supported my desire to go to college, but they could not financially support me. And this too, with over the last 40 years, the federal government has withdrawn its support from university education, and so young people today are being asked to pay far higher rates for even a public education than people were asked to pay back in the day. And so that means that the debt that people are assuming in order to get to university is terrible. I do think that we need to go back through those student loans. There was about a 6-year period of time where the federal government handed over to for-profit contractors the calculation of student loan debt and the collection of it, and they cheated students. That's just the way it was, especially people who'd signed up to have their debt forgiven in exchange for taking public service jobs, and that's wrong. So I think the Biden administration needs to continue to unravel that so that people got the deal that they bargained for and figure out a way to make it easier for students to pay off the remaining debt. They also need to make student loans available for tech schools, for apprenticeships, for community colleges, so that it's not just for universities. And I would cut off any federal funding for unaccredited schools. The diploma mills like Trump University and other scams should not be getting any taxpayers' money or able to pick any students or their families' pockets.
Now for our fourth and final question, Jamie Stacy, NAACP Vice President.
The economy remains a significant concern for many families. How will you work to ensure that people in Spokane have access to good paying jobs, opportunities to save for the future, and support for their children's education?
So let's start with those good paying jobs. Let's pass the PRO Act just as soon as we can get in there. That is essential to making sure that people who are willing to work and work hard and work for a living get fair treatment, a safe working environment, and a wage that will support a family and eventually developing into generational wealth. Another thing that we'll need to do is get back to some tax fairness. Right now, there are corporations who are paying a far lower effective tax rate than my nieces who are public school teachers or my nephews who are a paramedic and a corrections guard, and that is just wrong. Working families are now subsidizing not just very poor people who need a hand up, we're also subsidizing the extremely rich and corporations that are raking in record-breaking profits. And Jamie, there was a third element to that. Support for children's education. So one thing is public money should only ever be spent on public schools. If there are people talking about voucher programs and being able to divert public money away to private schools, we've seen the future in Republican-controlled gerrymandered states, and what that looks like is welfare for the rich. That people who already can afford to have their kids in private schools get those tuitions subsidized, and poor kids, especially rural poor kids, get less and less of an education as the loss of those students in public school systems deprives everybody of the money that they need to get a good education. The best countries in the world, the happiest countries in the world, are the ones that invest in their children, and we need to do a much better job of that.
Now you have 3 minutes for your final remarks.
So thank you for those questions. It was a struggle and a challenge to try to answer in such a short period of time, but they were thought-provoking, and it's exactly the sort of thing that we should be thinking about. The Constitution was put together by former insurgents who, after they defeated the British, sort of were a loose collection of states and figured out that if they didn't all hang together, they were going to hang separately. They were getting picked apart by the British and the French navies. And they put together a constitution, and it was imperfect, including the fact that it included, sort of a time frame to preserve the enslavement of certain members of our body. And that was, as Abraham Lincoln said, our original sin, and that still exists, the legacy of that today. But if we go to the top of the Constitution, the aspiration that it set forward is that we, the people, to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and preserve the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. We can't just be looking at the quarterly bottom line. We need to be thinking for our generation, for our kids, for our grandkids, and onward. And to do that, we have to preserve our freedoms. We must recognize the historic anomaly of the Dobbs decision. For the first time in American history, it revoked 50 years of precedent that granted individual freedoms to people to decide whether to start a family, when to start a family, who they're going to marry, who in their family is going to go to work, and who's going to stay home and be able to collect benefits. We also need to take care of our climate and work towards a zero carbon future. We need to feed our family farmers can continue to survive through the climate change that is underway right now. So one of the things we need to do is get a farm bill passed. This nonsense that we somehow can't put together a farm bill so that we agree that we help farmers so that they can continue to raise our food and at the same time help our families who are struggling to put food on the table. The deal in the farm bill is that urban people and rural people alike that agree that one thing we will do is ensure that we can raise our own food. We will support the people doing that, and every family in America should be able to break bread together at their own table. That's what I want to work on. I'm pro-union, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-Eastern Washington, and I hope that I will earn your vote and represent you in Congress starting in January. Thank you.
Thank you to candidate Carmela Conroy, your candidate for 5th U.S. Congressional District. Now that concludes tonight's candidate forum and town halls. We thank you to all of the candidates, all of our panelists and their amazing questions, and to everyone who came out this evening. Now Lisa Gardner, the NAACP president, will return with her closing remarks.
Well, thank you to Natasha and Carmela for participating in the town halls. Thank you to Al French and Molly Marshall for participating in the candidate forum. And thank you to our panelists. I appreciate you for showing up for us and showing up and representing your communities. Thank you so much for that. Thank you to the beautiful Shannon Curtis and Crim 2 News for being our moderators tonight. Thank you again to the civic engagement community. Please grab your snacks and waters on the way out. We have plenty of them. But most of all, thank you to all of you who not only came tonight to listen to the candidates and to listen to the forum, but also all of the work that you do in the community and caring about the community. Thank you to those of you who are online watching. Whatever reason you're unable to be here tonight, but still thank you for participating. And I actually have a video to show you as a reminder that we do have our NAACP Freedom Fund banquet that is coming up on November 9th. We hope that you are able to attend, and here we go. So please visit our website or social media, purchase your tickets. If you have any questions, please let me know. We're very excited about that. If you would like to volunteer, we are definitely taking volunteers to help us with this once a year gala. We did not have it last year, but we're looking to get back started for 2024. We have our reaction room that's going right now, so definitely thank you to them as well for participating and giving their reactions, and thank you all for coming out tonight.
Hey everybody, we are back. We just finished the town hall. I hope you guys joined in because there was some juicy information that was provided, and just an understanding of where these candidates are sitting, and the information that they're going to push forward. So let's start with Natasha Hill. Natasha Hill is somebody born and raised here in Spokane, Washington, has gone and ran for state senate. Excuse me. Thank you. Congress. My bad. Sorry. She ran for Congress and did just a phenomenal job. Had a phenomenal showing. But is now currently running for state representative.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that was posed to her was around mental health in public schools and how she was going to push the funding for that completely. How did that sit with you guys? We know how serious mental health and behavioral health is, especially post-COVID, and our children dealing with the long-term ramifications of that. How did that conversation sit with you?
Well, full disclosure, she is one of my best friends.
Yes.
So, that's actually what she talked about in the forum, where she said that I'm running for this seat because she wasn't really anticipating about running for this seat. After her loss at Congress, at a respectable 40% versus Catherine McCorris-Rogers, multi-year incumbent. But she said, where I know people and their families don't want to be the last, and she's building the bench, and this is her community. So I feel like when she was talking about mental health, she really knew about this investment in Hilliard. She really knew, like her, I live in District 1, and Hilliard is one of the spots where it's actually designated by the census as an area of persistent poverty. It's so bad that the census designated as an area of persistent poverty because for decades, that is the poorest part of our state. So the fact that she was talking about mental health, it's not only because people are not getting enough sun in the winter, or it's because of COVID, or it's because of the internet. No, this is something that's been there for a long time because people are underemployed. People are not getting the services that they need. People are not being seen. And when she said, "I see you," that's something that we need in Olympia.
Full disclosure, I think a lot of us could say we're really good friends with Natasha, right? But that really speaks to her connection to this community in so many ways. One of the things that I like that she said is you can't punish your way out of this. She recognized that there is a deficit, right? She's going into a budget deficit, but understanding that the social determinants of health, that all those that you just mentioned are really impacting this mental and behavioral health need, and her commitment to ensuring that we're not going to punish our way out of it. And sometimes you can feel that way, right? When you're dealing with your own mental health issues, having those services taken away can feel like, well, I opened myself up and now they're gone. And so I really appreciated that. Anything else? How did that sit with you, Demetrius?
I mean, that set really well with me. Honestly, I was impressed just because I'm in it every day. And I think that is a huge barrier when it comes to just developing the community and the youth and in the schools, and how can teachers can't teach and be a therapist or a mentor or all those things. So to take away that funding for that is a little absurd. It's really absurd, actually. But on top of that, it's just the investment really isn't the access to the services, it's educating the families that they actually have access to these services. And they don't know that. I mean, how many families that are in poverty that have insurance through the state know that, that they're covered with mental health services? Not many, So to take money away from that is not a great idea. So the fact that she says she's going to focus on that is a huge, when you talk about homelessness, when you think about all the things that Spokane's experiencing, addiction, all that, it really comes from the youth. I mean, in the organization I work for at Excelsior, I mean, we serve kids 0 to 20. And in my experience, I've seen some youth as far as, ages 9 and 10 that are in addiction or that have mental health and behavioral health disabilities. So it's like that's where the core problem is.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that she did mention that.
Yeah.
Also, one thing that I like how you mentioned homelessness, because a lot of people, when they complain about people who are experiencing homelessness, they're schizophrenic, they're speaking to themselves. It's like, yeah, a lot of that is expensive to treat. And especially in Black and brown communities, a lot of it's cultural competency. Because I like how you said that not only are people in poverty not aware that they are covered through their health insurance for mental health services, it's also a stigma. In Black and brown communities, it's a stigma, and we don't have a lot of people who will break down that barrier, because when I sought out health and mental health services, a lot of people were like, are you crazy? It's like, no, we don't say that anymore, first of all. But also, it's normal to talk to somebody about your day, to talk about those stresses, to talk about coping mechanisms. And one thing I'm very proud of, shameless plug for Nuestras Raíces, is that we actually got a grant to put billboards in Spanish throughout Spokane to say, mental health is health. And also, Mías Mujeres en Acción, who is the Latina group that's dealing with domestic violence, they're also doing mental health programs. So we're slowly breaking the stigma within the Black and brown communities. But like you said, people need to know that this is already covered.
Yeah, absolutely.
For free. For free.
Yes.
All right.
When we looked at, or she was asked what her top 2 legislative priorities were,
I know you liked one of those answers.
listen, not Natasha coming through with the clutch in the clutch, right? But her top 2 priorities, she mentioned housing and rent stabilization, public safety, and then threw in childcare. And I appreciate what she said in that childcare really is kind of that connective tissue. She didn't use that phrase, but it's that connective tissue throughout our community. You can't have workforce development, you can't have economic vitality without a healthy childcare industry and ecosystem. But when she's talking about housing and rent stabilization and public safety, how do you guys feel about those being her priorities?
I think that's exactly where the focus needs to be.
Yeah.
But it's how do you fix that? You know, how do you really fix that with inflation and the cost of living and all those things? And there's so much. It's not just a state problem; it's a world problem. You know, so I think that's bigger than just the seat that she's sitting in.
Yeah.
So it's just how are you going to be effective that way?
Well, it's also bringing our perspective here in Eastern Washington to the table, right? Because, like you said, with rent stabilization, so there's different language out there for grants, right? There's rent control, rent stabilization, there's affordable housing, there's attainable housing. You know, going through the alphabet soup, it's good to have someone with lived experience there, right? Because she is a single mom, she's living in an apartment. You know, we don't really have someone in Olympia. Well, actually, she's not living in an apartment right now, but she has lived in an apartment before. So having someone with that lived experience in Olympia, making those decisions and actually knowing about the housing market here in Spokane, that's different from the housing market in Seattle, where we have less resources out here. To see that, you know, I like how she said, we're the 2nd largest city, 4th largest county, with room to grow. And that's something that Olympia needs to pay attention to. So that's something where our lived experience will be brought to the table.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we get to our other candidate. I just want to quickly mention one of the things that Natasha said is that she was really adamant about is that she wants to bring others that look like her to the table, right? She said, I don't want to be the last one here, right? I understand that, and I echo that so much. And it really, to your point, Kayla, that you were talking about earlier, and making sure that representation is everywhere, so that we all have an opportunity at that table. So any final thoughts on Natasha before we move on?
I'd like to hear from Kayla's perspective as the
Yes.
Gen Z here.
I just what I really liked about a lot of the stuff she talked about is she broke it down, because a lot of the things and issues that we have, it's not just one part, it's not separated, it's all connected. And I think that I love that about how she is talking about what she's going to do to fix those issues from the root. And that's important.
Yeah.
And I really love that.
Excellent. As we wrap up, because we haven't heard a whole lot from you, I would love to hear just your perspective and representing your community and your age group. How did you feel about tonight's forums and the candidates that spoke?
I honestly loved the last two because I felt like they gave more of a voice, and I guess that's also support kind of like what their positions are. Congress and stuff like that is supposed to be the biggest part of representation of the people. And so I love that part of the forum, is to hear them talk about issues and actually talk about trying to represent others in community.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being a part of this forum and these conversations with me. You guys stay in community, stay connected, stay unified.
And get out there and vote.
And go vote.
Go vote.
November 5th.
November 5th.
On the 5th
All right.
of November.
Walk your ballot in if you need to. Walk your ballot in.